Okay, picture this.
Yeah.
You've got a business, right? Maybe you're moving product, maybe it's raw materials, and suddenly you're staring down this logistical mountain.
Yeah.
Getting those goods from point A to point B, it can feel like a whole separate job sometimes.
You really can. And well, that's exactly the space where freight brokers really step in.
Right. And that's what we're diving into today, crucial role these freight brokers play in keeping the trucking industry moving.
And by extension, a huge part of our economy. We looked at some really informative material to try and give everyone a clear picture of what they do and, frankly, why it matters.
Yeah, our goal here is basically to cut through the jargon, give you a practical understanding of the freight broker landscape.
Mm.
We want to explore how they actually operate, what rules they have to play by, and maybe even some of the less straightforward parts of the industry.
Think of it as your insider's look.
Yeah.
Maybe a shortcut to understanding this vital piece of the supply chain puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just jump right in. At its simplest, what is the fundamental job of a freight broker?
Okay, so at its core, it's really about making connections. You've got shippers.
Hmm.
These are the businesses with goods that need moving.
Right.
Then you have carriers
Hmm?
at the trucking company, the ones with the actual trucks.
Okay.
The freight broker is the one who brings those two parties together. They're essentially the link.
The middleman.
Kind of, yeah.
Mhm.
But what's key to remember is that the broker doesn't own the trucks.
Right. No assets.
And they aren't physically loading or unloading the cargo either. Their value comes from their expertise, their network, their ability to find the right fit,
Matching the shipper's needs with what a carrier can actually do.
Precisely. One of our sources called them the logistics world middleman. And I think that really captures it well. They leverage their knowledge.
So, okay, walk us through a typical process then. Like, what does their day-to-day actually look like if I'm a shipper?
Right. It generally starts when a shipper reaches out. They have a need.
Yeah.
So if you were that shipper, what information do you think you'd need to provide first
Yeah.
to get the ball rolling?
Well, I guess the basics, right? Where it's starting the origin, where it needs to go destination, how much it weighs, probably its dimensions, and maybe the most critical thing,
Yeah,
the timeline. When does it absolutely need to be there?
exactly. Spot on. With that info, the broker then goes to work finding a suitable carrier.
How do they do that? Just call people they know.
Sometimes, yeah. They might reach out to trucking companies they have established relationships with. That's a big part of it. Or they might use online platforms called load boards.
Load boards. Okay, what are those?
They're essentially online marketplaces. Carriers list their available trucks, where they are, where they're heading, and brokers post the details of the loads they need to move.
Ah, okay. So it's like a specialized matching service for freight. Interesting. What happens once they find a potential carrier?
Well, then comes the negotiation. The broker acts as that intermediary again.
Okay.
They negotiate the terms, and a huge part of that is, naturally, the price. They need to land on a rate that works for the shipper and the carrier.
And leaves room for their own fee, I assume.
Exactly, while also covering their own service fee. It's a balancing act.
And it doesn't just stop once a price is agreed, does it? The stuff still has to actually move.
No, not at all. The broker plays a really crucial role in coordinating the whole thing. They're communicating with both sides, tracking the shipment's progress.
Like the central point of contact.
Pretty much. If any issues pop up or unexpected delays, the broker is usually the one managing that communication flow.
Right. And then, okay, the delivery's made successfully. What about the money side?
Good question. So the broker then invoices the shipper for the whole service. Once they get paid by the shipper,
Then they pay the trucker.
then they pay the carrier for doing the actual hauling, keeping their agreed upon margin, their commission.
Okay. So looking at the whole picture, a good freight broker sounds like they can really simplify things if you need to move freight. What are the big benefits for, say, the listener?
Yeah, our sources definitely highlighted several key advantages. One is just efficiency.
Well-
Brokers have the networks, the expertise. They can find the right carrier way faster than someone, unfamiliar with the industry.
Saves time. Makes sense.
And that access to a bigger market can also mean cost savings. Brokers might find you better rates or find capacity during busy seasons when it's tough for individual shippers.
Right, when everyone's scrambling for a truck.
Exactly. And finally, reliability. They handle the coordination, the potential problems. It takes a load off the shipper's shoulders.
That definitely sounds valuable. Now, this whole industry, it can't just be built on handshakes and trust, can it? There must be rules, regulations.
Oh, absolutely not. You're right. In the U.S., freight brokers operate under the authority of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. the FMCSA.
FMCSA, got it.
And they have to comply with a number of specific legal requirements. It's not a free-for-all.
Okay, let's dig into those rules. What are some of the key legal things a broker absolutely has to do?
Well, first and foremost is licensing. You can't just decide to be a broker tomorrow. You need to get what's called broker authority.
How did I get that?
By filing a specific form, the OP1 with the FMCSA, and they also need an MC number, a motor carrier number. These are basically their official licenses to operate.
Okay, so step one, get licensed. What else is non-negotiable?
Financial security. This is a big one. Brokers are required to have either a $75,000 surety bond.
75,000, wow.
Yeah, $75K. It's known as a BMC 84 bond. Or they can have a trust fund agreement, which is a BMC 85.
Okay, BMC 84 or BMC 85, what's the point of that money? Is it like insurance?
It functions like a safety net, primarily for the carriers.
To make sure the truckers get paid.
Exactly. It ensures they get paid for the loads they haul. It also offers some protection against potential fraud by the broker. So if a carrier doesn't get paid, they can actually file a claim against that bond with the FMCSA.
Oh, interesting. So there's a direct way for them to try and recover funds up to that $75,000 limit, I guess.
Right, up to the limit of the bond.
Yeah.
It provides real recourse.
Good to know. Okay, so licensing, financial security. What else is legally required?
Detailed record keeping is essential. Brokers are legally obligated to keep thorough records of all their transactions.
For how long?
For a minimum of 3 years. This includes contracts, payment details, all the communications about the shipments. It ensures transparency.
Makes sense for audits and stuff. What about how they actually conduct business? Any ethical rules baked into the law?
Yes, absolutely. They are legally obligated to conduct business ethically.
Meaning
They can't misrepresent rates or services, and it's strictly forbidden to, like pressure carriers, into violating safety regulations like driving too many hours.
Right, you definitely don't want that. Safety's got to be paramount.
Totally non-negotiable in trucking. And related to that, they have strict payment obligations too.
Back to paying the carriers.
Yep. They have to pay carriers within the agreed-upon time frame, which is typically around 30 days after the delivery is successfully completed. Prompt payment isn't just good manners, it's the law.
Got it. Okay, now what about liability? If something gets damaged while the truck is moving it, who's responsible? Is the broker on the hook?
Generally speaking, no. Freight brokers aren't usually liable for the loss or damage to the cargo itself during transit.
Okay.
That responsibility typically falls on the carrier, the trucking company actually hauling the goods.
So if my fragile stuff gets broken because the truck hit a huge pothole, I go after the trucking company, not the broker who arranged it.
Pretty much. That's the usual way it works.
Yeah.
However, brokers can be held legally accountable if they, say, misrepresented the details of the shipment or if they engaged in fraud. Or, and this is important, if they didn't do their homework vetting the carrier, if they hired a carrier known to be unreliable or unsafe.
So they have a duty of care in selecting the carrier.
They absolutely do. While they aren't insurers of the freight, they do have that responsibility.
Okay, this all sounds like a system with some decent safeguards, but our sources mentioned a dark side, something called double brokering. What exactly is that?
Yeah, double brokering. It's an illegal practice. It happens when a freight broker accepts a shipment from a shipper.
Okay.
And then, without telling the shipper, without getting consent, they hand that same shipment off to another broker to actually find the carrier.
Wait, so broker A gets the job, then secretly gives it to broker B?
Yeah.
Like subcontracting without permission?
Exactly like that. And it's a big problem in the freight world.
Why? What's the harm?
Well, for you, the shipper, it can lead to really unreliable service.
Yeah.
Suddenly you have multiple layers of brokers involved, often without your knowledge.
Sounds messy.
It is. Communication breaks down, tracking becomes a nightmare, and delays become much more likely. It's just a logistical headache waiting to happen.
I can imagine. Are there other downsides?
Oh, yeah. Financial risks are huge. When a load gets passed around like that, it can become really unclear who is actually supposed to pay the carrier who eventually hauls it.
So the trucker might do the work and then not get paid.
That's a very real risk. Carriers can end up doing the work and struggling to get paid or not getting paid at all, which is obviously terrible for them.
Yeah, that's awful. And I assume this is illegal. What happens if a broker gets caught double brokering?
Oh, it's definitely illegal. It's a direct violation of federal transport regulations. Brokers caught doing it can face substantial fines, penalties.
Like losing their license?
Absolutely. Suspension or even full revocation of their operating license. It really undermines the whole system. We
Hmm.
talked about the importance of licensing and bonding, double brokering, just bypasses all that.
You'd think with penalties that severe, it wouldn't happen much. Why does it still seem to be an issue?
Well, the FMCSA themselves acknowledge that it's a tough thing to combat effectively.
Why is it so hard to catch?
One of the main hurdles is just limited data. It's hard to track these illegal handoffs. There are also jurisdictional complexities, figuring out who has the authority to prosecute. It often requires working with the Department of Justice, which isn't always a quick process.
Hmm. So the regulators know it's bad, but actually stopping it consistently is tricky.
Mm.
Okay. Now, shifting gears slightly, our sources also mention some recent changes, or rather delays, in FMCSA regulations. What's going on there?
Right. So the FMCSA introduced a new rule aimed at strengthening financial responsibility requirements for brokers and freight forwarders. The goal is to better protect carriers.
Good. What's it called?
It's formally called the Broker and Freight Forwarder Financial Responsibility Rule. But the key thing is that the implementation of some important parts of it has been delayed.
Delayed. Why the holdup?
The main reason seems to be delays in getting a new online registration system up and running.
Yeah.
This new system is needed to actually support these updated regulations.
Ah, tech issues, classic.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
So as a result, the compliance date for several key provisions got pushed back. Yeah. It was January 16th, 2025.
But no.
Now it's January 16th, 2026, a full year later.
Okay, so some new protections are on hold for a year. What are these delayed rules actually supposed to do when they finally kick in?
Well, one pretty significant provision is the immediate suspension of a broker's operating authority if their financial security at that $75,000 bond or trust fund,
Yeah.
if it falls below that required level. Right now, there can be a lag. This is meant to be a much swifter response if a broker hits financial trouble.
Okay, that seems like a really important protection for carriers, cutting off risky brokers faster. What else got delayed?
The updated rules also put more responsibility on the surety companies, the ones issuing those bonds.
Oh,
They'll be required to notify the FMCSA directly if a broker seems to be facing insolvency, and they'll have to initiate the cancellation of the bond themselves. It's kind of an early warning system.
trying to catch problems before carriers get left unpaid makes sense. Are there penalties for the bond companies if they don't follow these new rules?
Yes, there are potential teeth there too. Financial institutions that fail to comply could face penalties, including potentially being banned for 3 years from providing these bonds for brokers at all.
Wow, okay, so the FMCSA is definitely trying to tighten things up, but you said there was pushback on the delay?
That's right. Industry groups, especially those representing carriers, have voiced concerns. They argue this delay leaves carriers exposed to potentially unstable or frankly unscrupulous brokers for another whole year.
They want the protections now, not later.
Exactly. They feel these enhanced safeguards are needed sooner rather than later to ensure fairer practices.
Yeah, it highlights that classic tension, doesn't it? Implementing complex new systems versus getting needed protections in place quickly.
It really does.
Now, amidst all this complexity, regulations, delays, double brokering worries, one of our sources mentioned a resource called Cargo Credible. What's that about?
Yes. Cargo Credible was presented as um, a potentially valuable resource for pretty much everyone involved in trucking. Shippers, drivers, carriers, even other brokers.
What does it do?
Its main goal seems to be providing industry news, insights, keeping people updated on regulatory changes like the ones we've been discussing,
Okay.
and also offering a platform for reviews, a place where people can share their experiences, good or bad, about different companies they've worked with.
So sort of like a Yelp for the trucking industry, trying to build more transparency.
That's a good analogy, yeah. By centralizing information and feedback, the idea is to empower stakeholders, like, maybe someone listening who needs to hire a broker or a carrier
Right.
to make more informed decisions. It's about trying to foster more trust and reliability overall.
Interesting. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Bringing it all together, freight brokers are clearly essential cogs in the logistics machine.
Absolutely. They're the connectors, making sure goods get linked up with the transport needed. When it works well, it adds huge efficiency.
But as we've definitely discussed, it's not always simple. The industry has real complexities, challenges, especially around the rules and making sure everyone plays fair, avoiding things like double brokering.
Definitely. And understanding these dynamics is, I think, really key for you, the listener. If you ever need to arrange shipping, knowing how brokers operate, what they should be doing legally.
Like asking about their license and bond.
Exactly. Knowing about that MC number, that $75,000 bond requirement. Being aware of potential red flags can really empower you to navigate the process better and protect your own interests.
That's a great takeaway. Knowing what questions to ask a potential broker to make sure they're legitimate and financially sound.
Definitely things like confirming their MC number,
Sure.
asking about their bond status, basic due diligence.
Right. So here's a final thought for everyone listening to maybe chew on. With this regulatory landscape constantly shifting and these ongoing efforts to clamp down on shady practices, how might all this ultimately reshape the freight brokerage industry? Will it become more efficient, more trustworthy?
And maybe what role do informed stakeholders, people like you listening, play in actually pushing the industry in that better direction?
Yeah, something to think about. How does knowing this stuff actually influence the future? Well, that's definitely food for thought until our next deep dive.